Okay, welcome everybody to episode 30 of the Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. I am Anthony Ewing, partner here at Thoughttium. We go live every Thursday afternoon with leaders and leadership topics that matter most to you all. And we stream live to LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and also at thoughttium.com/live. So thank you to everybody who is joining us, particularly those folks who registered and are in the Zoom room with us. For those folks who are in the Zoom room with us, you have the opportunity to engage and ask questions throughout. You can do that by clicking on the chat box icon and saying hello or asking questions in chat. For those of you who have joined us via LinkedIn, we welcome you every Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock Central. Thanks for stopping by, whether this is in your news feed or whether you registered for the event. You all can check in as well too. We'd love to hear from you. Say hello in comments or ask any questions as we go along. So we are 30 episodes in, which means 30 weeks into the Navigating Now Roundtable series. And we have been really focused on leaders in the commercial space who are at the forefront of not just the change that we've all been managing this year, but also at the forefront of supporting their business and their people in unique ways. And we have yet another return guest to the roundtable in Brian Tufts. He's the Senior Director of Marketing at Baxter International, based here in Chicago. Brian is not only a leader, he is also a member of the Navigating Now community. And gosh, Brian, it was about 24 weeks ago that we had you on the show. And you were with a group of other leaders talking, and we were really at the doorstep of the pandemic. And you were talking about how you were supporting both the strategy of your organization and all of your people in the change that you started to see coming at you. And we just love the fact that you are joining us here now 24 weeks later to do a little bit of retrospective and to look forward in terms of what does leadership look like now that we're moving through 2020. And we're looking forward to 2021, as well as, what shifts have we seen in the marketing space that we should keep an eye on? So a lot to cover today. Brian, thank you so much for joining and welcome back to the roundtable.
Yeah, thanks. I must have made quite an impression 24 weeks ago to get the return invite, but it's crazy how much has changed since then. And I'd love to pen a letter and send it back to myself from 6 months ago. That would probably be very helpful to prior Brian.
Yeah, it's interesting, just the concept of time these days. As much as 24 weeks ago seemed like it was just yesterday, a lot has happened, a lot has occurred. And we all as humans and as leaders have been processing the change as it's coming towards us. And if anything, this year, it feels like the change has just been coming more quickly. And we want to touch on, change that you've been seeing and change that we've been seeing in both the leadership space and the marketing space. But one of the reasons that I just love to have, folks like yourself back on the show, especially in one-on-one like this, Brian, is that we have a community that are very interested in you as a leader. The path that you have chosen, you work for a great organization in Baxter. You're doing some phenomenal things. And so I want to take some time and get to know you first a little bit and share some of your kind of career path and insights with our community, because I know we've got some folks who are interested. So would love for you to tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about your career path and some of what you're doing at Baxter today.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can go through that, and it's interesting that I hear so many people talk about their career path, and they preface it by saying, "I have a bit of a non-traditional career path," right? And it turns out that you talk to most senior leaders, and it's going to come across as a non-traditional career path, right? So, by education, material science engineer, bachelor's and master's in material science engineering, and I went to work for a startup company. Entrepreneurial venture. I was employee number 6, I think, right? And we grew it up to like 24 people by the time I left. So that was super fun. And I was kind of the engineer that could walk and chew gum, I guess. So I moved into sales and marketing and went back and got my MBA to formalize that. And that really opened up my eyes to a whole different world of, kind of what you think marketing is, and marketing like, oh, that's commercials and that's product and price and promotion. But oh my goodness, it's so much more than that when you think about kind of end-to-end marketing and product development and go-to-market strategies and everything else that comes into play. So business school was great, fun time, opened up my eyes. And after that, decided I wanted to make a change and move out of the materials industry. And I moved into healthcare. We talked to folks in the network, let them know I was making change, and did something that was similar to what I was doing before: product development, understanding customer needs, turning them into product requirements, but moved industries, right? So went from the material space, high-end material space into healthcare, and joined Baxter Healthcare, over 12 years ago at this point. And I've had the benefit of doing different things at Baxter. So started in product development, then took a role in the global strategy team, then did some downstream, kind of pharma marketing, moved upstream into a global franchise role in franchise strategy. And for the last 4 years, I've been a commercial lead in our US renal organization with responsibilities for acute dialysis, hemodialysis, and then recently our expanded hemodialysis portfolios. So it's been great. I've been with, like I said, Baxter 12 years and been able to do kind of different types of marketing along the way and had a lot of fun along the way. Yeah,
that's quite a career path. And, I, also pursued an MBA in marketing and also started my sales and marketing career with a startup. And I'm curious, because I get this question asked a lot, what did you take from your experience in startup now working for, a large international organization? And do you feel that startup experience is a prerequisite for the type of work you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, prerequisite is a strong word, right? Like everyone has to do it at some point in your career. I'll tell you what, though, the sense of urgency that you feel in a startup, right? And going from one round of funding to the next and turning it profitable and having your first profitable month, right? That's one of the things that I have in my office that I still cherish is the dollar bill from our first profitable month, right? It's one of those things that feeling that your feet to the fire and that passion and energy and urgency around it, it can be lost candidly in large, multi-billion Fortune 500 organizations, right? And so many leaders in those organizations try to instill that sense of urgency, and we got to go and we got to grow and but there's so much stuff going on as organizations become, just large beings in and of themselves, that it's a lot to manage. So I think the sense of urgency, and just go forward, go fast. It's just different in an entrepreneurial environment. And for those, I hope there's a lot of people out there that are nodding their heads for those that have been through it. And for those that haven't, I'm telling you, it's a lot of fun. It really is stressful, but fun.
And as you transition from the startup space to now, leading teams within larger organizations, is there anything that you struggled with in that transition? And I'll maybe, put something out there because, I started in large pharma. I then went to the startup space. And then I went back into a large organization. And one of the things that I struggled with oftentimes was the pace at which we were able to build and make decisions in larger organizations just isn't the same level of speed and tenacity that you often experience in a startup. And so, I had to really slow down at times and appreciate the planning and the kind of thorough nature of the larger organizations, and also just the incredible kind of responsibility that you have to make sure that you bring people along as you build and you get excited about things. Was there anything that you struggled with in transitioning from the startup space to a larger organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it. I think it's the speed, right? And it's the number of stakeholders, right? Because if you're in a small organization and you're an entrepreneurial organization, you may have to convince one or two people that you're doing the right thing. Hey, you agree? Does that make sense? Oh yeah, it makes sense. Okay, I'm going to start that tomorrow. You cool? Oh yeah, for sure.
Right.
In a large organization, you may need to convince 14 people various different, hey, I want to talk to this person. I want to talk to the associate director there, and they're going to talk to her VP, and that VP is going to talk to the other GM. But we got to make sure that the global team is on board too. And we got to make sure that we cross-check that with legal, and right, for all the right reasons. And I'm not throwing stones at any large organization, right? For all the right reasons, right. But it just inherently slows things down, right? Now the balance against that is resources. Right. And that was the one thing that I really did enjoy going from the startup world and joining a larger organization. All of a sudden, projects that you're scrapping for and trying to figure out in a small organization of how are we going to get this done, and where are we going to find the $10,000 to make that happen? How can we get this over the finish line? All of a sudden you get to a large organization, and budgets are very different and resources are very different. And if you're in growth mode at a large organization, you get a lot of opportunity. Right. So I think it's that balance of figuring out ways to go fast and to say, okay, I want to maintain this entrepreneurial spirit. I want to maintain this culture of forward momentum and moving with pace, but doing it within in the construct of the larger organization system. Right. So pushing folks, and that requires, quite honestly, a little bit more thoughtful planning. Yeah. I think in the entrepreneurial space, you could be super nimble, right? Like, we want to do this. You agree? Yeah, we agree. Okay, go. And Fortune 500 companies aren't going to work that way. But if you could be really thoughtful and tee things up ahead of time and kind of pre-bake things and get others aligned to where you're headed in that vision, then when opportunities arise, hopefully you can move a bit faster and keep people on board and keep that forward momentum.
Yeah, and you're reminding me of, I say this a lot in terms of there's 3 cumulative years that I wouldn't trade for anything in terms of my experience. It was the 2 years that I spent in the startup space for all the reasons that you and I just talked about, and the year to 18 months that I spent in a large consulting organization where, very similarly, you were moving at the speed of light and you were working across, a handful of different projects. And as much as it takes a bit of a mental transition then to navigate and embed yourself within a large organization and lead within a large organization, the skills that you pick up in that startup space are not only transferable, but they're also extremely valued in the large organization space. So, Brian, thanks for sharing a little bit about your background. I'm just always so curious as to how people land where they do, and so you've ultimately landed in a leadership position within Baxter, and it's just cool to hear that you've been there for 12 years. So I want to talk a little bit about maybe just the evolution of your work at Baxter, and particularly zoom in on some of the changes that you see coming forward. But, we love having leaders at the table talking about leadership, because I feel like, as with a lot of things that we're focused on right now, leadership is one of those components that's very quickly evolving. And there's a lot of dialogue around leadership right now. There's a lot out there on how to lead through change, how to lead through crisis, how to support your people. And so I'm just curious, we're 24 weeks from our last conversation, when we were really at the doorstep of the pandemic. How are you, and how has your leadership evolved over the last 6 months? So I guess part one of the question is, have you evolved over the last 6 months, and how has your leadership evolved over the last 6 months? Or maybe that's the same question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dynamic time, right? So for sure, right? Things are changing, and what we saw with originally kind of wave 1 of COVID, and then wave 2 through the summer, which was just kind of a slow burn, and then now right in the midst of wave 3, like right in the throes of it right now, and not really understanding where that's going to go, if it's peaking right now and is going to wane through the rest of December and January, or whether this is just the start of a peak that's going to become a monster peak in January, February, right? So we don't know, and COVID's been very humbling to myself and anyone else who's tried to forecast or predict through it. So of course things are changing, and of course things are dynamic. I think from a leadership perspective, I don't know. Maybe not so much, and I'm gonna maybe be a little provocative as I say it, but I think it's more a refining and honing of leadership skills and things that were always important, more than a complete change, right? So I've read some stuff, and Anthony, your question is very fair, because I've read some stuff online that are like, throw out the old playbook, everything's changed, it'll never be the same again. And that stuff is out there. And I don't know, I guess I kind of fundamentally reject that. I think that good leadership traits, if you're reading a solid book on leadership management in 2017, 2018, 2019, the things that you would read about are clarity in communications, expectation management, clear prioritization, that type of stuff. And I think that when you read about managing in a crisis, you're going to find some of those same themes. I mean, McKinsey just put out an essay, a short essay, earlier this month, last week, right? And they had interviewed an admiral that was, did like nuclear naval subs, right? So they asked him about like a lot of ambiguity, and you don't know how long things are going to last, and it's actually kind of an interesting analogy, right? And I enjoyed the essay, but when you read it, he talks about managing as a team. He talks about accountability, right? It's kind of the same themes. That's like, well, you probably should have been doing that in 2019 as well, right? Like it's like new things that you would just have to, leadership during a crisis. I think they become all that much more important. It's easy to say communication is key. And then you could say, okay, well, hold on. In times of crisis, in times of a highly dynamic and external environment, maybe the frequency of that communication is key. Maybe the transparency of that communication, of what we know and what we don't know, and being really clear and transparent with that communication is key. And I think just being candid with your teams, with other employees, is so important in those times of ambiguity. Yeah. But I wouldn't say that that's fundamentally different, right? So if you were having this conversation a year ago and asking me about, communication as a leader in 2019, I would tell you the same thing. Like it's frequent communication, candid communication, transparent communication, two-way communication, really asking people how they feel, making sure that you are understanding where your team is at. Like that stuff is important in general. It's even more important in a highly dynamic external environment and in kind of the times of crisis we're at in the pandemic. I think that the importance ratchets up, but I don't think it's new, right? Yeah.
Well, I think, regardless of your perspective on, how drastically things and how permanently things have, quote, changed, I do think it's important to, anchor ourselves to what hasn't changed, and then zoom in on those things that we need to your point, intensify or ratchet up. I want to talk a little bit about maybe how the importance of leadership has affected, shifted, changed your day-to-day. We talk about leading day-to-day. Are there things that you're doing differently every day now that either A, we're behind Zoom screens, or B, you don't have the access to your people the way that you do, that are a little bit different? Or are there lessons that you learned very early on? For example, I think we've learned ourselves here at Thought Team and working with clients that, the first few months of this, let's call it, March through June, there was a lot of really just trying to kind of flip the in-person agenda virtual, which meant people saw gaps in people's calendars and knew or thought that they could fill those gaps. And so we went through the summer, and I think there was just collective period of time where we all realized we have to create space in our agendas, and we have to create space for our people. Not everything can be, not everything that we did live, the hallway discussions, the quick touch points can just be turned into a 15 or 30-minute Zoom. So that's one of the learnings from, that we've learned here. And we've been able to kind of step back from some of the Zoom intensity, if you will, over the first few months. So, how are you leading day to day? And are there any tips or tricks that you can provide our community in terms of the way you're executing your leadership on a daily basis?
Well, I think so. And I guess for context, I should have context too, that one of the businesses I mentioned that I'm responsible for is our acute dialysis business in the US. And that's something that's been particularly heavily hit from COVID. I think everyone knows about COVID as a respiratory disease, and a lot of patients have to go on vents, but it's also attacks the kidneys. And a lot of folks that end up in the ICU and are experiencing multi-organ failure have kidney challenges. So it's been a very, very dynamic year for our ICU kidney business at Baxter. So when the team has really been stretched and strained because of that. So I think that we talk about kind of conservation of energy, right? Of like, how much energy do you have? And I know burnout's a big topic and people are like, oh my gosh, people are burned out. And to your point, like calendar fills up and then you're working and no commute, there's no break. And then you're working in evenings and mornings and weekends and how do you avoid burnout and everything else along those lines. So I think that that's something that I've really continued to work on, both for myself and my team, of making sure that we conserve energy when appropriate. There's going to be times where you have to sprint, right? Where you have to go like really hard for a day or a few days, but you can't sprint a marathon, right? And the pandemic is obviously turned into that, and it's going to continue to stay that way, right? You know, I haven't checked the news in the last hour, but everyone's kind of waiting on pins and needles, right? It's 3:20 Central Time right now as we're speaking, as to whether we're going to get emergency use authorization for vaccine in the U.S. But I'm telling you, that doesn't mean COVID goes away on January 1st, right? It's going to take a long time before things are anywhere back to the way they were. If ever. I mean, that's years, right? So, and at least a year till we have any level of kind of herd immunity and can be doing, you know, large in-person gatherings and everything else again. So when you take that and say, wow, this really is going to be a marathon, this is going to be a long time, we need to, as a team, conserve our energy and make sure that we have enough fuel in the tank when we hit that next sprint moment, when we really do have to sprint, that you have enough energy there, both as an individual, as a team. So then how do you do that, right? So it's easy to say, oh, that sounds great, Brian. For me, it's been bringing more people along in the journey, right? Making sure that I'm not single point accountability. Like I can't be the guy that's responsible for all this. So that's meant elevation of roles and responsibilities for people in the organization just in the last few months. And I've had conversations just that candid. I need you to take on more. I need you to do more. This is a great opportunity for you personally and professionally. Here's what we need to do. But I also need to be thoughtful that I'm not putting too much on those people plate and driving them to burnout, right? So it's kind of sharing that burden thoughtfully and then making sure those folks are well supported as well. And for our business, that's meant pulling more people into the acute business. That's mean literally reshuffling part of the organization to support the team that's under most duress right now. So that one I think really is important. Being thoughtful about your own energy levels, and we could talk about ways to manage that. And then the team's collective energy and their energy levels. Yeah.
And are there certain conversations that are happening in your one-on-ones that, you know, maybe your people are a little bit more open to sharing, or they're a little bit more real, raw, authentic with kind of where they're at? Are you noticing that your conversations with your people are shifting?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I mean, and again, so we can talk about leadership and right and wrong and how things are set up. I've been a leader that's always been fairly close to the people on my team, and know them and know their kids and know their kids' names and that type of thing, right? So I've always tried to kind of have that you know, level of connection with folks on my team. But I would say yes, to answer your question, this year, it's probably just got increasingly raw, right? And part of that's because everyone's working from home, right? Those whatever kind of, you know, professional guards and facade that everyone had, like in the office and, you know, that type of thing, that's all gone.
Sure.
For me included as well, right? And I get, you know, Zoom bombed for my kids and stuff like that, right? So some people have seen my kids running around in their pajamas and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it cuts every which way. And I guess I'm going to call that a positive silver lining, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if this is led to increasingly just kind of unfiltered conversations amongst folks, that's probably a good thing. And maybe that's in some ways replacing the drink at the bar after the long day at the conference, right? Because there's a lot of that kind of social interaction that happens in the workplace, but it happens when you're on business trips or otherwise, right? And those aren't happening this year. So it's replaced in a different way, which is so important to make those connections. And I got to tell you, it takes work, but I have a colleague I work closely with that started, I don't know what his start date was. I'm going to call it March 20th, somewhere in there was his start date. And I think he was in the office for like 4 days, like picked up his laptop and got to see his office, and then like poof, everyone's gone. So he hardly met anybody in person. And it's been interesting to build that over 6 months and build that connection and candor and everything else that comes along with building a relationship in a truly virtual world.
Yeah, it's such an interesting point in that, there will be, entire teams of people who either haven't met or have completely, have onboarded almost completely virtually. And that clearly is going to, in many cases, especially with small organizations, it's going to establish a new baseline of communications and governance, almost to the point where, when things open up, and I think we can all agree it's not going to be an overnight thing, but as things open up, we will almost have to recondition ourselves for the face-to-face. It's interesting. We were on a call with a leader of an organization who is planning for an upcoming virtual NSM. And of course, this is going to be their first virtual NSM. Large organization, they are so used to and always look forward to the convergence of their commercial team, at the hotel, resort in San Diego. And it's interesting because, for years they've been doing this, and most organizations have, and there's a certain level of questioning and almost complaining about, having to fly to San Diego and make the arrangements and be away from your family and get together as a team. People enjoy it, but there's also aspects of it that people have historically really complained about it. So they kick off this virtual NSM, and it's the leader of the organization who's addressing the entire team. And his first questions to folks, and he put it in the chat box, was, "Welcome everybody. Tell us what you would be most excited about if we were live." And I thought it was such an interesting question, because what you got was just this incredible response of what people miss the most. Hugging my colleagues, shaking people's hands, seeing people from across the country that I only get to see once or twice a year, grabbing the stale cup of coffee outside of the general session area, and saying hi to people and kind of commenting on the content that was being presented. So I also think there will be this reappreciation for some of the even monotonous aspects of the face-to-face world. And I'm so excited about rethinking work. And I think we're all doing that right now. I think we're all kind of personally taking inventory in terms of what's important to us. A lot of us are making real decisions based on, our health and our happiness and our families. At the same time, there's going to be aspects of the face-to-face that people are going to really enjoy kind of getting back to. And it's the convergence of both, where you can respect and protect the aspects of your wellness that are most important. And we can come back to those aspects of the face-to-face that really, really promote the best in business, which is connection, relationships, communication.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how everyone kind of figures that out for themselves of what they missed and introverts versus extroverts versus I love to do things face to face. And I think there's other people that are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to travel so much less moving forward, right? Some road warriors that are just, reassessing and saying, wow, now that I know what can be done, now that, I didn't take a flight for 6 months, wow, I'm really going to rethink this.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, right? And I think you're right. There's some people that are going to rush back to, got to get big things back the way they were. And there's other people that won't feel that way. So it's going to be a real interesting dynamic, but I like the direction you're headed there of being thoughtful, being intentional, and then self-selecting and seeking, hey, these are things I really want to do. And now I'm going to appreciate it more. Right. Because I can do it again type thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so you touched on, some of the priority initiatives that you are a part of at Baxter. And it seems as though your work has become even more current and relevant with COVID due to, the certain aspects of your business and certain disease states that you all play in, and their connection to COVID and that point of care being such an important place now for your customers. I also know that you've been, when we talked 20 weeks ago, you've been really focused on how you continue to maintain that level of customer service and connection to your customers in a time where your people are prevented from being there on site, which, when you're talking about any type of hospital device, that type of hands-on training is still extremely valuable. So tell us a little bit about, how you've been able to, service your customers, some of the exciting things that you've been involved in. And you and I talked about this the other day, that I was trying to get to kind of what is at the heart of your focus here as you maintain continuity and drive customer service. And we talked about trust being kind of at the center of it, right? That it's about deepening trust in these times. So maybe talk a little bit about that as well.
Well, and I think I'm gonna replay the theme that I mentioned from a leadership perspective, I guess from a marketing perspective as well. That if you're saying, hey, marketing is different in 2020, like because of the pandemic, throw out the old rules of marketing. It's a whole new world, right?
We can throw all the books out.
I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Right. The leadership book, the marketing book, toss them all. I don't think that's the case either. Right. I think that, creating value for your products and services and making sure the customers understand those values, meeting customers where they're at, delighting your stakeholders, having them great customer experience, having them be, repeat purchasers and buyers and advocates for your products and services and technologies. All those things are still important. And I think when you look at it, the pandemic has just, again, kind of intensified that and put that value under a microscope. And I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. So working in pharmaceuticals and working in hospitals, we have a new product, and we've been fortunate to have a number of new products come through, right? We've got emergency use authorization for, I think, 4 products since the last time we spoke, right? Wow. So the pace of change is mind blowing, right? I mean, it's just so fast, right? Our team has launched 6 new products in the last 6 months, right? 4 of which were unplanned. So that's it. Wow. It's a thing, right? And that's what I talk about, burnout and energy and conserving
that's incredible.
For the sprint and everything else. So sorry about that. Joys of working from home.
Life.
And so it's one of those things that when you're launching new products and taking them into the hospital channel, sometimes it can go very quickly, and sometimes it can take a long time, right? There's value analysis committees, VAT and P&T committees and other things that are looking at, what's the value of this? Does a hospital want to do it? Are we going to buy it through our hospital system? Is our integrated delivery network? Are we on contract with GPO? Right? So some things can just kind of take forever when you do a new product launch. And now in times of COVID, that's taking even longer. And the hospitals are saying, oh my gosh, we're underwater and we got to source PPE and we got COVID and we got a million other things going on. I don't want to talk to you about your new products right now. It's just got to put that on the back burner. That's conversation for another time. I don't have time for it right now, right? So that could really slow down launch. Conversely, if you have a product that's meeting their needs and they really want, you'd be shocked how quickly you can kind of cut through the red tape and get it in use and on patients, right? So I'm proud to say, one of our products, we went from like authorization, like literally, FDA gives us emergency use authorization. We went to having product available, being able to promote it, taking our first order, we couriered it to the hospital. I think it was on a patient within like 54 hours of approval, right? So, I mean, that stuff can happen when you're really focused on it, and when the products and services you have are driving that type of value. So it can cut both ways, right? Like I said, the new, I'll say it over and over again, the dynamic external environment, because that's the best way I can say it, right? Can really slow things down. And like, times of COVID, it's going to take forever. It can also speed things up. I mean, that just depends on what your market looks like, what the value proposition of your products and services look like, and what your relationship with your stakeholders are, right? You asked me about how has that changed? And you're right. A lot of hospitals have just gone on complete lockdown and said employees only, essential personnel only. even when we have a lot of our team and our therapy specialists and everything else that are seen as valuable partners to those hospital teams, and even valuable partners to the ICU teams and the very care teams that are treating COVID patients, they're right? Only hospital employees. Like, you have to have a badge to get in, right? So, no access at all. And we've gotten super creative in terms of doing training, in terms of doing troubleshooting. We shot a whole series of videos, and we made those all available for free on our website to do training. We do kind of live customer support via Zoom, via FaceTime, right? We've had nurses put their iPhones in a Ziploc bag and take it into a COVID room, and we're there on the back end with our camera and our device trying to replicate the challenge that they're seeing, right? So the team has just done awesome things to meet the customer where they are, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the type of stuff we're doing. But to more generalize that, that's very specific to hospital.
No, it's great to start there.
We're working on. Yeah. But to generalize that in marketing speak, right? It's understanding those customer needs, making sure you have a clear, crisp value proposition, and making sure that you're meeting the stakeholder where they are. Right. So what's going to work for them? Are they open to make a change this year or not? If they are, is your product meeting where they're headed, or is your product what they needed a year ago? Right. Yeah. So it's making sure that your products and services are aligned to your customer needs right now, and that your value prop is crisp and clear and clearly articulated, so that you can continue to push that forward. Right. And that cuts across industries. I mean, I'm giving you a specific example from acute dialysis in the ICU, but generalize that across, any industry.
Yeah. I have a handful of questions. But I want to start here because it's one of the things that I've been thinking about too, as a classically trained marketer and somebody who just really appreciates marketing. There's clearly no, better demand than necessity. And clearly you all are playing in a space right now where there's just a huge need. With that being said, that doesn't mean marketing efforts are thrown out. It doesn't, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's no need for marketing. Do you feel as though maybe the marketing cycle, like I'm trying to think of even just the downstream effect of like you all needing to, your go-to-market has condensed. Does that also condense your marketing efforts, or even trim some of maybe the, for lack of a better term, trim some of the marketing fat that sometimes exists in like our campaigns and our overall strategy now in a world where you're producing product and taking it to market almost immediately? Does that change the cycle to which you're developing and deploying marketing?
Yes and no. So I think it changes in very much kind of the salesmanship way. Like, how are sales going? Where are we at in the funnel? That type of thing. Well, when there's that much need and there's that level of necessity, I think some of your sales pivots almost to kind of customer support. Yes. How am I supporting my customer? Or do they have everything they need? Do I need to be working with them in a different way? So I think it becomes less of kind of sales and more just kind of customer support. But when we're looking at in case medical devices, right, and making sure that we're training folks on therapies and giving them the right information in a timely way and clearly communicated, all those things are still the same, right? Yeah. We need to be very clear. Here's the product. Here's what it can do. Here's the indication. Here's the patient population. Here's if the diagnostic says this, think about this, right? All those things are still important, and following industry guidelines and everything else. To make sure that nephrologists and intensivists and all the stakeholders we talk to are appropriate in that way. I'll jump completely far afield because this is something that I've been working on to make sure that my network isn't just friends and colleagues in the medical device space. I continue to try to cultivate my network and the folks I talk to and hear from that are across all sorts of different industries. And I had a good conversation with the guys in the food service industry. That's supporting restaurants and that type of thing. And they had a tough April and May, if you couldn't have guessed, right? But he had the same thing. And he was like, yeah, we just kind of had to pivot from sales to support. And we helped our restaurants out in ways we never would have thought. We had to source disposable silverware. And we had to help them out with like the outside tents and stuff like that. And we helped manage them through. We were no longer sourcing steaks and food and everything else on the order that we were before. It was much tinier, right? Everything fell by whatever you've heard, 60, 80%, right? But they pivoted. Takeout containers, well, that went up by 700% or whatever it was, right? I mean, it was dramatically different. So it's really interesting. But I'll generalize that again, meeting your customer where they are, having that meaningful relationship with stakeholders to say, what do you need? Like, yeah, things are really kind of crazy right now. What can I do to help? And having that value and being there to create that value. And if ever there was a time, and people talk about like, are you my vendor? Are you my partner? Right? All fun buzzwords to toss around in marketing, right? But if all you're doing is making and selling an undifferentiated widget, then when the external environment changes radically, it's tough, right? Yeah. You may not sell as many widgets. If you're the true partner that's working with your customer in whatever dimension, then as things change, hopefully you could change with them and continue to provide value for them and help them out in new and different ways. Mm-hmm. And I think that really does cut across industries. And it's helpful for me to hear from folks in different industries. And hopefully some of the people who are joining us today are from different industries and hearing directly from healthcare, like, oh, that's interesting. But it's so true, right? I mean, it's true across whatever area you're working in.
Yeah, you just raised, I think, such a great point around this transition from a sales orientation to a customer service, customer support orientation. And I know, there are books written about this. And at the heart of every selling model is the concept of establishing partnership and taking more of a sales or a service orientation. If there ever was a perfect opportunity now for us almost to be forced to take a service orientation, it's what, we're all navigating this year, particularly in the commercial space and not just in life sciences, to your point, across all industries, whether your products are in high demand and their emergency use authorization, or whether you're an industry that's been hit extremely hard by COVID. We're all now being forced to take a stance of really understanding the needs, really being able to find unique ways to not just sell features and benefits, but to support. And in the case of your renal acute space, your folks were almost thrust into this position where they had to figure out how to immediately provide service at the point of care. And most of them probably were already doing that, but they had to find new ways to do it. That led me to another question that I'd love to just touch on very quickly. And you had mentioned about, how creative your field team has had to get in terms of reaching their customers. And I just love that the example of someone having to show, their iPhone through a plastic bag. And as you were telling that story, as somebody who started my career in the field, I think back to years ago, that would never be accepted, right? In a hospital environment, to be that low fidelity with the way that you are approaching your customers or providing information. Now, the level of fidelity that's required, right, for us to provide value and information, from my perspective, has gone down considerably because there's just a need for the information. I'll give you another perfect classic case of this. This show right now that we do every week, prior to COVID, was a recorded show that we would spend an afternoon with our guests, and we would record, an hour and a half of content. We would spend a week and a half in post-production making kind of the perfect piece of content, or from our perspective, what we thought was the best. And then we would distribute a recorded piece of content, and we would do it, once a month, once every other month. The ability to get together and do that in small spaces went away this year. And the ability for us to connect face-to-face went away. So we were forced to take a much lower fidelity approach to, putting perspective out there. And the Navigating Now Roundtables, it's a perfect example. Now, every week, we just hit go. And there is no practice, there is no script, there is no post-production, and this content is out there. And that has really challenged us in some incredible ways to, lower the judgments that we might have of our own content and our perspective, the opinions of others. All of that comes together in almost this permission, right, to lower the expectation of perfect and to just provide value. And it sounds like your teams have been doing that out in the field as well too. And I wonder if that level of fidelity is going to increase once we are back face to face, or whether we're going to learn that we can reach customers in more authentic, more real-time kind of channels or platforms.
I think it's all about the content and the value, right? So, I mean, if you think about your Navigating Now series that you guys are working through, absent this week where you got stuck with me, right? Where I was your guest. I mean, you have CEOs, you have a lot of really thoughtful, big time leaders on, right? If you're providing that value, does it have to be recorded, polished, everything else, right? And with a tight little bow? Probably not. It's great content. You have great leaders giving great insights on solid content, and that's what people are going to show up for, right? So if it's a little bit more raw, or you have things in the background that you're hearing from leaders like you had from me, right? That stuff happens, but that's okay. That just makes it all that much more authentic. I mean, pivoting to our team, right? So when I talk about the clinical educators that are helping on the hospital space, right? In some instances, and for the most part, they did a lot of that in person, right? They would go and help and do that in person in the hospital. And obviously we couldn't do that anymore. But we ship these devices, and the devices we work on are actually fairly large medical devices, right? So we ship these to our clinical educators' homes, and we put little studios with lighting and audio and everything else, like in their living room, right? So, and they would troubleshoot and do live trainings, from their homes. Now you would ask, hold on, Fortune 500 company, and you're just going to have backdrops that are in someone's. I tell you what, though, these folks, their clinical knowledge and training and support is second to none, right? And that's what's needed. So the fact that it's coming live streaming from their kitchen doesn't matter. The fact that you're talking to the world experts that can answer the exact question that you need answered right now, that's what's important, right? So I love think, that. Not to be too cliche about it, but content wins, right? So the polish, and you can have the music as it plays in, and you can star wipe in and this and that, and you can put all the pizzazz around it that you want. But at the end of the day, content matters, value matters, and you'd be surprised the customers will just gravitate towards that. And it doesn't matter how raw, unvarnished, unpolished it is. If you have the right content and value, I think that wins. And I think this year has proved that, honestly.
Yeah. And it sounds like for you, it's also the right people, right? So you had a team of these clinical educators that had the passion and the resilience and the knowledge, right, to be able to deliver that message anywhere, whether that was on a planned appointment, in a closed conference room with their customers, or whether it was on the spot, in Zoom. And it sounds like it was oftentimes in their family room or their kitchen, which I just think is incredible. And it sounds like, again, you've got the right team of people to do it.
Yeah, and they're passionate about it, right? I mean, they want to help. And a lot of them are former nurses and everything else. They legitimately want to help, right? Yeah. Which is great, and then the technology allows it to happen. So it's super cool overall. And like I said, it's pivoting from sales to customer support, just doing everything we can to support the customer, and that makes sense both short term and hopefully makes sense from the longer term arc, right? And I guess maybe we can wrap up and move to Q&A on that. That's good marketing from a longer term perspective, right? We're there for you. We've been there for you in 16, 17, 18, 19, right? Definitely there for you in the crazy year that was 2020, probably 2021 as well, right? So we were there, through that long period, and we'll be there for you moving forward, right? Of being dynamic, being nimble, providing value to customers along the way. That's what's a solid strategy, solid marketing plan over time, and that's going to stand the test of time. And I don't think that means ripping up the marketing playbook in 2020, ripping up the leadership playbook in 2020. I think that means staying the course, clearly communicating to your team and your customers, having goals and priorities that you work with your team to hit, making sure that aligns to their own personal objectives and growth and development and everything else. And then you have a high functioning team that enjoys what they're doing and is learning and growing and developing. Yeah. And they're meeting the needs of your customers and stakeholders who see value in that and repeat and grow and everything keeps moving forward. So if you're doing all that well in general, then I think you're well positioned to do that in a highly dynamic environment.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it better. And I just love that thesis of, as much as we're looking out for change, let's also make sure we pay attention to what needs to continue and what needs to have even more focus. So Brian, thank you so much for that perspective. And some of the anecdotal stories are just so powerful in terms of the way that you all are meeting the needs of your customers. We've just got a couple minutes left. I've got two questions that I almost want to combine. One's from our YouTube community and one's from LinkedIn. They're fairly similar, but I love both of them. And it sounds like our community is really interested in you, Brian, as a leader. One of the questions that came in from YouTube is, Brian, what are you doing personally to maintain yourself as a leader in the pandemic? And then we've got another question that I think is fairly similar, and I'll combine the two, and you can kind of approach both of them. But how does this past year affect your career path? And I think what's behind that question is, does all of this at all, change kind of your perspective on what's most important for the future of your career as a marketer, as a leader?
Yeah. So how do I maintain myself? Okay, that's good question. Good question. I mean, I'm gonna go back to what I mentioned off the top about energy, about team energy, yeah, and personal energy, and I think that's important. So for me, I've really tried to maintain connection. I'm a bit of a networker and try to keep in touch with prior friends and prior work colleagues and business school folks and everything else, right? So I've tried to maintain that over the last 6-7 months in a virtual world. And, my wife and I we have a personal Zoom account, and I literally Zoom with friends and talk to folks about it, right? And am fortunate enough to have a network that includes other senior leaders at other organizations. And I do think it's helpful to benchmark outside of things, not just in healthcare, but I have a friend who's a CEO of a telecom company, and hearing what he's going through this year and his customers, he works with a lot of small and mid-sized customers, some of which have gone out of business. And he said, yeah, it's been kind of a crazy year. We lost some customers we didn't think we were going to lose. We had some go under, but there's other customers we work with that had to transition everything home, and that's been a big boon for us. Mm-hmm. And it's just really interesting to hear him go through it, because at the end, he kind of walked through and said, but you know what? It was all about having the right sales team, the right sales funnel, and we've lost some customers, but we've put enough in that, like, net, we're going to be okay this year, and we're still going to grow. Not as much as we wanted to grow, but 2020 is still going to be a growth year for the company. And I congratulate him and said that was great, and we talked about this back and forth, but that keeps my energy up, right? So that motivates me to talk to other leaders, talk to other friends, to see what other people are doing and kind of benchmark that way. Is interesting to me. And I'm a bit of a marketing and leadership nerd, right? So I mentioned the McKinsey article earlier. I don't know how many people spend their nights and weekends reading McKinsey management articles or reading the latest, Korn Ferry blogs. There's plenty of resources out there if you want more kind of the academic side of what people are thinking. But I like, yes, the question was what keeps my energy up? It's connecting with others, right? Those meaningful connections with others. And I've done a lot of fireside chats in my backyard, right? So I got my little fire pit in the backyard, and we'll social distance and have a friend come over and sit 12 feet away across the fire pit, and just catch up. That energizes me. That keeps me going. And I think that's really important. A question on a career perspective: does 2020 change career pathing or planning or anything else along those lines? I'm going to put that one back into the camp of, if you're thinking about your career development and making sure that you are getting experiences that are demonstrating your capabilities in your current role, and that you're looking for new roles that are close enough to what you've done previously that you can go in and really be highly successful, but different enough from what you did that you're going to continue to pick up, learn new different skill sets, then that's going to best position you on a go-forward basis, right? And leading the team that I'm leading right now across marketing, communications, and therapy development and product specialists and everything else, having a year in which we went to the FDA with 4 different products seeking emergency use authorization, and we're 4 for 4 and got all of them approved, launching them, taking them to market. It's been a big year for the team. It's been a growth year for me in various different dimensions, right? So I would answer that question of saying, if you're doing the right things from a career development standpoint, if you're trying to have meaningful experiences and you have a growth mindset along the way, then when you come into a highly dynamic time like 2020, it's just going to mean more growth, right? And that's what I think of myself as a leader. That 2020 is, it's been a crazy year. It's been a dynamic year in a lot of ways, but it's been a growth year for me, much like a lot of the prior years have been as well. And that's something that I'll continue to seek and take forward.
And this is so great to kind of end on this, but I think you've just got me thinking about, as a leader, acknowledging that we are in potentially one of the biggest development opportunities of our career. Because we keep thinking about, how do we maintain continuity and how do we get through this, and we're all in it together, and the other side. But I think it's important for us to pause as leaders and realize that we are literally, regardless of the classes that you might be in, or the mentorships that you might be a part of, which are all valuable, there's no better time for us to be practicing than today as leaders. And Brian, I want to thank you for your practitionership in this space. It's just been great to have you on, 20 weeks apart, and to see, how your perspective has evolved, and in some cases how it hasn't, which is also really refreshing, and I think a testament to just the consistency with which you lead. So really, really appreciate you stepping in. Thank you for your time, and also thank you for your perspective.
It's a pleasure. It was fun conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, I would like to again thank Brian for joining as a panelist today, sharing his perspective. I also want to thank our communities for joining. So 30 weeks in, it's just been an absolutely incredible year. We at Thought Team could not have done any of this without leaders like Brian and others stepping into the discussion, and our community so intrigued, engaged, and interested in the dialogue. So I want to thank everybody who joins, whether you've registered for the event or whether you just stop by on the LinkedIn feed. We really, really appreciate your community. And with that, we will close the year out next Thursday, same time, same channel, 3 p.m. Central. We're going to do things a little differently though. We are going to do a live 2020 year in review. So we're going to review a lot of the discussions and anecdotes and wisdom from 31 weeks of Navigating Now. And we're also going to have a few special guests join us. So we are excited about next week kind of wrapping the year up, and we invite you all to join us. You can register to join thoughtteam.com/live, and you can always tune in /live on YouTube. We want to thank everybody for joining, and we hope you have a great rest of the week. We'll see you here next week, Thursday at 3 Central. Bye now.